Hi, I'm glad you're here to be with me for Godly Play again today. Today we're going to have a story about a desert. Have you ever been to a desert? I haven't, but a desert is full of sand. And a desert can be very dangerous because the sand moves all the time, so it's hard to tell where you were. The desert doesn't have much water either, so it's hard to find something to drink. And you know, if you don't get something to drink, you can die. And because there's no water, it's hard to grow things. So it's hard to have food in the desert. People don't go to the desert really unless they have to go. Now last week, Miss Bobby told you the story about the big ark and how when the flood was over, people and creatures came off the ark 2 by 2 and they settled. Well, when the people came off the ark, they settled near the rivers. And Abram and Sarai were part of the people that lived in this town here by the river. In the name of the town was in everybody believed that there was like different gods. There would be a god for a rock. There would be a god in the mountain. There would be a god for the river. There would be the god of the sand. Most people believed that, except for Abram and Sarai. They believed that there was one God over all of those things. Well, when it was time for them to leave, they were not sure whether their God would go with them or not. And they followed the river, and they took with them all their helpers. They took their tents. They took their animals. They took everything. And they followed the river. The trip took a long, long time. Then one day, Abram did see some other people coming from a town. So he knew that his trip was almost over. And they settled over here in Haran. So all of Abram and Sarah and all their helpers and the tents, they all went there. Now when they lived here in Haran, sometimes Abram would go way out on the desert at night. And Abram would come so close to God, and God would come so close to Abram, that Abram would know what God wanted him to do. And one day, God told Abram it was time to leave again. Only this time, they would not have a river to follow. So they got all their people again, all their helpers, all their animals, their tents, and they started following what they thought God was telling them where to go. They came to a place called Canaan, and they kept going. And then they stopped at a place called Shechem. And when they were in Shechem, Abram went off to pray, and God was there. So Abram took a rock, and he built an altar to God at Shechem. But that was not where they were going to stay. God told them to keep going. So there they go again, Abram and Sarai and all their helpers, and they kept traveling. And then they came to Bethel. And Abram did the same thing at Bethel. He went out into the desert and he prayed, and Abram came so close to God, and God came so close to Abram. And again, Abram said, God is here with us. And he took another rock and he built another altar to God. But Bethel still was not where they were going to stay. They kept traveling, and they finally came to where they got to stay. Here they all are. And that place was called Hebron. Now, when they were in Hebron, Abram would go out and pray to God. And God told him one time, Abram, you are going to be the father of a great family. You are going to have a child, and you are going to have so many children that it will be like all the stars in the sky and as many as the grains of sand in the desert. And Sarai will be their mother. Well, Abram and Sarai were old at this point. And Abram laughed. He thought, that can't be. He went back to his tent, and then a little while later, out of the desert came 3 men. And they sat down with Abram. Sarai went in and she made a big meal for them. She made meat and bread and milk. And as Abram visited with these 3 men, the 3 men told him the same thing. They said, you are going to have a baby boy, and Sarai will be their mother. And Abram laughed, and Sarai laughed. Now God changed Abram's name to Abraham, and Sarai's name to Sarah. And you know what? They did have a baby boy. And because they had laughed, they named him Isaac, which means laughter. Well, Isaac grew and he became a young man, and Sarah died. She was old and Sarah died. Abraham was very lonely, but he knew he had one more job to do. He needed to find a wife for Isaac. So he sent one of his helpers back to his country to find a wife for Isaac. While Isaac was in the other country, he went to a well to get water for his animals, and there was a young woman there, and she said, "Can I help you?" And he asked her to help him get water. Well, she gave him water, and she gave all his animals water. And then she invited him to her house for dinner. He told her all about the great family, and she said she wanted to be part of that great family. So she went back with the helper, and she became Isaac's wife, and her name was Rebekah. Abraham then died. But Isaac and Rebekah had many children, and those children had children, and those children had children, and it kept going until like your grandparents, and then your parents, and now there's you, and you are part of this great family. Like, now I wonder about this story. What was your favorite part? I also wonder, could we have left any of it out, and would it still be the same story? I hope you will come back again next week and hear another Godly Play story. I look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye.